Okay, I'm going to get started, and if people join us, then we'll let them in as they come into the waiting room. So today, the webinar is about the NSF HBCU-UP program. And so today we're going to talk about the programmatic details and then how to put together a competitive proposal for this funding opportunity. So we're going to start out just by going over the program. Then we'll go into the different funding tracks. There's 5 different funding tracks that you can choose from if you develop a proposal. And then we're going to talk about putting the proposal together. What are the components that need to be included? How can you make your proposal more competitive? And then at the very end, there'll be an opportunity for questions. So the NSF HBCU-UP program is in the Division of Equity for Excellence in STEM. So it is a STEM-based program. And the goal here is to strengthen STEM education and research capacity. So you'll notice when we talk about the different research tracks that you can apply to, they are accomplishing different things at various scales. So small projects all the way up to center level projects. So the goals of the program are to increase the number of underrepresented students in STEM degrees and helping institutions accomplish research capacity in STEM disciplines. So there are some reasons that you should be interested in this funding opportunity. So it is targeted to HBCUs, so that limits the application pool, which increases your competitiveness. It gives you access to funding for research equipment and STEM education, as well as innovative sort of projects. This can be for innovating your classroom and integrating your research at the same time. The program offers a lot of opportunities for collaboration, so it is focused on collaborative effort and having multiple PIs on the project so that you can help with increasing the research capacity at the institution. It also aligns strategically with the mission of the institution in advancing our STEM directives as well called TIP or TIP. We have research for broadening participation in STEM projects, research initiation awards, implementation projects, and broadening participation research centers. So I'm going to go through each one of these briefly, giving a little bit of information on what distinguishes the different funding tracks. So starting with the targeted infusion projects. So these are the shorter term projects around 2 to 3 years, and these are aimed at enhancing STEM education. This could be updating curricula, creating new degree programs, improving lab equipment. So you can cover a lot of different things under the targeted infusion funding track. So the thing that you need to consider if you're going to go after a TIP project is having well-defined goals that are measurable and achievable within the 2 to 3 year time frame. Next is the research on broadening participation. So the objective for this funding track is to find ways to increase participation and success of underrepresented groups in STEM. So this really is targeting how to be more effective at reaching those underrepresented groups so that they can be successful. So there has to be a strong theoretical foundation. So you need to incorporate a lot of the literature and research that already exists. And you want to focus on institutional, behavioral, cognitive, and social factors that affect participation in STEM disciplines. So there is this encouragement of collaboration at this level with experts in education and social science. So it is a STEM-based program, but there is the need for incorporating other disciplines to be able to robustly address some of these research priorities, like identifying how success is improved. Next is the Research Initiation Awards. Now, with the Research Initiation Awards, this is really targeting early career faculty or mid-career faculty that are looking to restart their research program or research trajectory. So this is a really great funding track as sort of like a general sort of funding track. So you don't necessarily need prior experience getting funding. So this opens up a lot of doors for a lot of faculty, especially new faculty that don't have an established research program. So you can, you're conducting the research at your home institute, an NSF funded center or a national lab, and really the big goal is to increase your research capacity to engage undergraduate students in research. So there is a strong emphasis on engaging students. These could be undergraduate students through the curriculum, but it could also be graduate students through the research. Next is the implementation projects, and these are institutional projects up to 5 years where you're looking to reform STEM education in a larger sort of capacity. So the TIP project is really enhancing curricula. This is changing a program altogether within the university. So the goal would be to increase the number of students obtaining STEM degrees and improving STEM education quality and enhancing research capacity. So this is an interesting funding track because it really aligns with strategic goals of the university of increasing student activity, recruiting more students, increasing student research capacity. And what you want to do for an implementation project is really incorporate evidence-based models for teaching, learning, and curriculum reform. So there is a strong theoretical foundation for implementation projects. These are the larger programmatic projects, however. And then our fifth funding track is broadening participation research centers. So this is a center level funding track. So it's a longer term project up to 10 years. And the focus is to create these centers for conducting research and broadening participation. Now, a center could be anything from focusing on how social science and STEM interact, or if there is just a research project that has really given you a lot of like sort of subsidiary projects, you could propose to develop a center focusing on that research that encompasses or umbrellas your whole research trajectory. So it's really about building infrastructure to integrate new knowledge as a center. So this funding track requires partnerships and collaborations with other institutions. So this is a larger sort of institutional level grant or funding track, but you can create a center within your school or college or department. So keep that in mind. So for the project itself, for the program, you're required to submit a letter of intent that's usually due in July. If you get called for a full proposal, those deadlines are going to vary based off of the funding track. So you'll see here, most of the deadlines are in the fall. However, the center has a preliminary proposal deadline in March, and then the full proposal due in November. So the other important kind of component here are the budgetary considerations. So you're looking at around $400,000 for most of these projects. However, the implementation projects can go up to $3 million for folks that advance into the later stages of the proposal review process. Now, there are some things to consider, some caps on what you can spend money on, like equipment costs, because this is a student-focused program. So they want a lot of the support to go to students in implementing these new sort of ideas in enhancing and engaging underrepresented groups. The one important component that I want to mention, in addition to these dates here, is that this is a limited submission opportunity through the university. What that means is that there are only so many proposals that an institution can submit to NSF for the different funding tracks. So internally, we have a competition where PIs will submit their proposals. It's usually like a 1 to 2 page document, so it's not a full proposal. It's more like a letter of intent that you would submit to Research and Innovation, who will then put together a committee of reviewers, and those reviewers will go through all of the preliminary proposals that have been submitted, and they'll rank them in order, and then the top candidates will be chosen to submit for the actual program. So for limited submission opportunities, it's good to keep an eye on those early. We usually require those pre-proposals to come in at least 6 weeks before the deadline. So remember, this has an LOI, or a letter of intent, due in the summer. So you'd want to be thinking about this in the spring. And then once that limited submission opportunity becomes public on the R&I website, you would submit to that directly, and then you would be contacted by R&I if your preliminary proposal goes forward to submitting the full proposal to NSF. So just keep that in mind, that there's this extra step. So when you're developing the proposal, you want to do 3 main things to try to be to fulfill the requirements of the RFP and be competitive. So first, you want to align with NSF priorities. So we know that this project is about enhancing STEM capacity and research capacity and broadening participation to underrepresented groups. So you want your program, your project, to align well with that. And you want to have well-defined objectives. So you want to set goals that address specific challenges in STEM education at PV. What are the things that are challenging faculty in engaging students? How can we reach a larger populace of underrepresented folks to take part of our STEM programs here? And then you want to think about your collaborations and partnerships. So there is an emphasis on having collaboration and partners. But what you want to think about when you're trying to decide who to collaborate with, you want to leverage your experience with institutional experience, and fill your group of folks so that the people on your project don't leave any gaps in research or the education components. So you want your team to be robust and fill out the project where everyone has a specific defined role. And that's going to help strengthen your proposal. It's going to help show that you have a robust plan and you have the people on board to be successful. So as mentioned, the letter of intent is required for most tracks. This is usually a very brief document, usually 1 to 5 pages, depending on the track, where you're providing basic information about your program, your project, and what you are planning to propose if you get called for submitting for a full proposal. Now, the full proposal, if you get called to submit, has to include a project description, a management plan, an evaluation plan, and a dissemination strategy. So what is your project about? How are you going to manage the project over the time frame that you are proposing for your project? An evaluation plan. How are you going to measure success or impact? And then how are you going to share your data, your findings with the scientific community, but also the broader community? One really big important component of this proposal and program is evaluation. And they, NSF, that is, requires an independent evaluator to be on your project. So that means an evaluation company or consultant company outside of PV. They need to be independent, and they need to help you throughout the development process. So you'll be working with an evaluator to establish your evaluation plan while you're developing the proposal, because it is a component of your proposal. And that's going to help you set up the stage for how you're going to be measuring these different criteria throughout your project to know whether you've been successful or not, and whether your project has been impactful or not. So it needs to include both formative and summative evaluation plans. So things that are measuring impact throughout the program, but then also at the very end of the program, was it a success? Did you accomplish what you set out to do? If you did, what worked well? If you didn't, what could be improved for the next person to carry on that legacy, whether it's you or a collaborator? So when you're thinking about developing a strong proposal, you need to have this foundation of theoretical framework where you're showing the reasoning, the justification behind why your project is necessary. So you want to rely heavily on the literature and previous research and data. You want to fully incorporate broader impacts. So NSF evaluates on intellectual merit and broader impacts. For the broader impacts, you're talking about how your project is going to impact them across the institution and beyond into our community. And then institutional support. If you can get some support letters for your project, that will help bolster your competitiveness. So here are some tips that I've laid out to try to help give you a framework for the different aspects that you should be thinking about when you're developing your proposal. Now, keep in mind, there are 11 tips here. Some of these are general tips that are self-explanatory. Some are more specific to this program in general. The best advice that I can give is to thoroughly read through the RFP, the funding announcement, so that you are aware of what the programmatic goals are and you can align your work with those goals. So that's number one on the list, aligning your program goals with or your project goals with the program goals and priorities. You want to have these clear, measurable objectives, and part of the reason for that is because you are doing an evaluation, and so you have to have these components that can be measured. Not only that, but you are producing data, and so you need to have objectives that can be supported with the data you're collecting. You want a strong theoretical framework like we've previously discussed. You want to emphasize your broader impacts and how the larger community is going to benefit from your work. Engage in institutional self-assessment. That will be included in your evaluation plan. So you're self-assessing your project and how you're running the project. Collaborate effectively. Make sure that your collaborators fill out your project so that all areas of the research and work are managed by a specific PI on the project. You want to have your robust evaluation plan. That's going to be through an external evaluator, so they will develop that for you. Now, one thing that I want to mention that I didn't when we talked about evaluation is budgeting considerations. National level programs typically have, or you'll incur anywhere from 3 to 10% of your annual budget on evaluation. That's usually how it's charged. So let's say that you have a project that each year is $300,000. You should budget upwards of $30,000 a year for evaluation. So it can be extensive and costly. So please keep that in mind when you are working to find an evaluator. Their rates are negotiable. And typically what happens is the smaller your grant, the larger their rates are, or the larger the percentages. The larger your grant is, the smaller the percentages. It works out about the same as to the amount of funding dollars that they will be collecting from your grant, but they work their percentages differently based off of your bottom line. So just keep that in mind. If you have questions about going through and finding an evaluator, please feel free to reach out to me. I can help identify one for you, and maybe we can engage in some competitive rate allocation. So that's a side note on the evaluation plan. Again, consider sustainability. How are you going to keep your project going after the NSF funding ends? And that can come from institutional support. So having those support letters that the institution in your department is supporting this project that you're working on will go a long way. You want to follow the proposal guidelines carefully. Again, that's something I can assist with. SRF assists with that as well. And you want to participate in pre-submission activities, attend webinars through NSF, talk to program officers, attend other webinars about the HBCU-UP program if possible. This will help give you a better idea of what the program is about, the priorities that you should be aligning your research project to, and how to be a competitive applicant. And lastly, planning for dissemination. So you need to have a dissemination plan for your work. How are you going to share what you have found with the scientific community and the broader audience? That's a huge component. So that could be through conferences, it could be through publications, not just peer-reviewed publications, but popular science magazines and journals, newspapers, media outlets. If you're working on a research project, we can assist getting you media coverage to help shine light on the work that you're doing. So you need to have this plan for how you're sharing your work, and it needs to be a pretty robust dissemination plan. Which leads to the next slide about dissemination and sustainability. So your dissemination plan needs to communicate your project outcomes, and the sustainability is how you're going to keep the project alive after the funding goes away. Maybe it will spark opportunity for additional funding through a different funder or through NSF, or maybe your program will have some self-sustaining capabilities. So I mentioned the merit review criteria for NSF. There's two major categories. There's intellectual merit, which is advancing the knowledge and understanding within your field, but across disciplines as well. And the broader impacts are how you're benefiting society and the broader community. So they're both equally important to NSF. So a lot of people will go heavy on intellectual merit and the scientific rigor of the work, and will forget to put as much effort into the broader impacts. They weight them equally. So don't give more attention to one of them than the other. Give them both due diligence. And if you need help coming up with a broader impact plan, again, that's something I can help you with. And if you need help finding community partners for that, that's something else that we can assist with. So some resources available to you while you're developing your proposal. Of course, the NSF guidelines that should be on your desktop anytime that you have a few minutes to spare. Go through that RFP several times, go through it often, keep it fresh in your mind, and follow those guidelines very carefully. The smallest sort of mistake can get you returned without review. Again, that's something we can help with in research development, but also SRF does a really great job during proposal development stage. Contact your program officers for the HBCU-UP program. This will help you focus your project so that it aligns with the priorities of the program. And it will give you a good idea of what NSF is looking for this funding cycle. the program officers are usually really accessible and really helpful in helping guide your plan. So if you send them a one-pager about what you're thinking about doing, they will give you feedback and let you know if you're on the right track or if maybe another program or a different funding track might be more appropriate. So they're really helpful. And make sure that you participate in workshops and webinars before the proposal is due. The more technical assistance you can get, the more competitive, the more put together your proposal will read to the reviewers. So what are your next steps? Well, you want to determine whether this program is good for your research plan. Once you do that, identify an appropriate funding track that aligns with your research, the institutional goals, and then start working on your plan to align with the NSF priorities. You want to engage collaborators early. So start building your team early on. You really want your full team to be with you on the development process. Now, you may be doing the majority of the legwork in developing the proposal, but you're going to want that input from your co-PIs and your collaborators throughout the development process. So put together your team early. And then create your drafts and allow a variety of people to review them. In research development, we can review your proposal, but it's good to have several other eyes on your document to get a variety of perspectives to help you build out that proposal so that it is as robust as possible at the time of submission. So get feedback from your colleagues, from your peers, from program officers. Like I said, a one-pager goes a long way with a program officer. And then, of course, your research development team can help you get your proposal to a really nice stage before submission. So with that, that's all that I have about the HBCU-UP program for today. I'd love to take any questions you have, Angela, about this program or anything else that maybe came up for you while I was talking. You can always visit our research and innovation page to find the limited submission funding opportunities and the proposal notification form that you'll submit at the beginning of developing a proposal. So you can always visit our webpage to get some more information. And then you can always email me. I try to be as available as possible. We can set up a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting, whatever works best for you if you have additional questions outside of today's webinar.